Hey YouTube, we are back again this week and back again this year for another video portion of the Daly Dose Sports Podcast. Hope everyone out there is doing well. Hope you're all staying healthy. I hope you had a safe and happy New Year. This week on The Dose, we have now reached our Daly Dose Top 5. And on New Year's Day, we saw Alabama pound Notre Dame 31-14 and advance to the national championship. But here's the question. Did Notre Dame deserve to be there in the first place? Our Daly Dose Top 5 is going to shed a little bit of light on that situation. So let's go ahead and jump in right now. Now, as we do every week that we actually get around to it, we need to get to our Daly Dose Top 5. So on New Year's Day, Notre Dame faced Alabama in the Rose Bowl in the college football playoff. It did not go well. Bama cruised past Notre Dame 31-14 in a game that honestly felt like it was over after maybe the second series. Now, it isn't that Notre Dame is terrible, don't get me wrong, they have some talent. It's just that Notre Dame's talent doesn't look like it's elite. They don't have one player on their roster that even comes close to resembling a Devontae Smith or a Najee Harris. They just don't. And yet, every year, Notre Dame keeps getting these big bowl games. I mean, remember that they had just been blown out by Clemson in the ACC championship a couple weeks ago. That score was 34-10. So why in the world did Notre Dame even get invited to the Final Four? Well, here's the thing. Notre Dame is a TV ratings bonanza because fans of Notre Dame will tune in to see them hopefully win, and haters of Notre Dame will tune in to see them hopefully get pounded. But either way, people will tune in. In fact, the Rose Bowl announced that 16.3 million people tuned in for that Friday afternoon Rose Bowl game. That sells some ads, folks. But I mean, this was just a one-time thing, right? It isn't like bowl games just invite Notre Dame to games that they don't belong to in every year, right? Well, about that. See, what had happened was today, our Daly Dose Top 5 counts down 5 times that Notre Dame was invited to a bowl game that they shouldn't have been in. And, I mean, it's not all their fault. I mean, if someone offered you $1 million, would you take it or would you say, no thanks, I don't need any more money? But it does happen. And as you will see today in our Daly Dose Top 5, it happens often. So let's start off at number 5, and we go back to the year 1994. Notre Dame at the time was playing for head coach Lou Holtz, but they hadn't really had a strong year. I mean, Ron Powlus was not the quarterback that some of the experts thought he would be. So the Irish lost to number 6 Michigan. They got blown out by unranked Boston College. They lost to unranked BYU. They lost to number 8 Florida State. And then their game against number 17 USC to finish the season ended in a tie. So Notre Dame finished the season 6-4-1, and most people were saying, I don't know that Notre Dame even deserves to get a bowl game. So what happened? They gave them a New Year's Day bowl game. The Fiesta Bowl invited Notre Dame to face the University of Colorado that had actually gone 10-1. Amazing looking back now that ever happened. But Colorado's lone loss was to number 3 Nebraska. The same Nebraska that would go on to win the national championship. And I mean, CU and Notre Dame did have some history. Remember, they had played those 2 Orange Bowl games in 1989 and 1990. So this would be a great rematch, right? Yeah, except it wasn't. Because Colorado, behind quarterback Cordell Stewart and Heisman-winning running back Rashaan Salam, super stud wide receiver Michael Westbrook, they steamrolled Notre Dame. They scored on 5 of their first 6 drives. Colorado actually led the game 31-3 in the second quarter. Colorado head coach Bill McCartney would retire after the game, and Notre Dame head coach Lou Holtz would last just 2 more seasons before he would retire as well. Notre Dame, going to the 95 Fiesta Bowl, comes in at number 5 because I think we all know they didn't belong there. We move on to our number 4 entry this week. And Notre Dame had gone through a few tough years after Lou Holtz had retired. Bob Davie had been mostly average. Tyrone Willingham had come in. He had started fast, but then he faded. Enter former Bill Belichick assistant coach Charlie Weiss. Now, Weiss was kind of known for being a bit of a jerk, but he had taken the Irish to a 9-3 record in his first season in 2006. He had quarterback Brady Quinn back, so I mean, what would the Irish do for Weiss in year 2? Well, they started the season ranked too high. They had them clear up at number 2, which they didn't deserve, and then they lost to number 11 Michigan in week 3. The Irish rolled through the rest of their season until they got to USC, where they got blown out 44-24 by the Trojans in their season finale. Again, most teams would go to a lesser bowl game, and they would take a small stipend for doing so. But instead, at the end of the 2006 season, Notre Dame got invited to play number 4 LSU in the Sugar Bowl. How bad was it? I'll tell you. Quarterback Jamarcus Russell threw for over 300 yards, and LSU blew out Notre Dame 41-14. Different year, same story. Let's move on to number 3. So maybe Notre Dame goes to big bowl games, but it isn't like they're going to the college football playoff or anything other than this year, right? Well, in 2018, they did. And that game comes in at number 3 on our list today. Hey, it's not Notre Dame's fault. The Irish went 12-0 in 2018. That sounds pretty good, right? Because we know that Notre Dame usually has a pretty competitive schedule. The problem was that their schedule, that at the beginning of the year looked so tough in 2018, turned out to be not very good at all. Michigan would finish with 3 losses. Stanford would finish with 4 losses. Virginia Tech didn't even make a bowl game. Both USC and Florida State finished their seasons under 500. So Notre Dame's best win in 2018, it was a blowout of number 12 Syracuse. Now, Syracuse was okay. Maybe Syracuse was even good in 2018. But let's be honest. Syracuse is never great. And Syracuse is certainly not elite. But the College Football Committee jumped at the chance to put the Irish in the college football playoff, where they would square off with Clemson and freshman quarterback Trevor Lawrence at the time. Of course, Lawrence smoked the Irish. He threw for 327 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Clemson rolled Notre Dame 31-3 in a game that bizarrely didn't really feel like it was even that close. Again, Notre Dame did what they were supposed to do. They won all their games. They were undefeated. But here's the thing. If they didn't have the name Notre Dame, like let's say another team had gone 12-0, would they get the bowl game? Oh, of course they would. Let's say their name was Central Florida. Let's say their name was Tulane. Let's say their name was South Florida or Texas A&M. Would they have gotten into the college football playoff? Of course not. Not with that schedule. But Notre Dame did. And again, they got blown out. And the 2018 Cotton Bowl comes in at number 3. We move on to number 2, and we go back to 2000. 4 years into the Bob Davie experiment after Lou Holtz. Davie had been largely average in South Bend. He had gone 21-16 as head coach through his first 3 years. But in 2000, Bob Davie had actually put together a decent season. The Irish went 9-2 behind a quarterback named Matt LaVecchio and a 1-2 running back punch of Julius Jones and Tony Fisher. Well, Notre Dame had actually hung with the number 1 team in the country at the time, losing by just a field goal to Nebraska earlier in the season. Then they had lost to number 23 Michigan State, but they had won their other 9 games. Sure, they had only beaten 1 ranked team, but when the season ended, again, the Fiesta Bowl couldn't wait to line up Notre Dame for another New Year's Day game. This time, they would face number 5 Oregon State. Well, I mean, who's Oregon State? Yeah, this time it wouldn't go well again because Oregon State quarterback Jonathan Smith threw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he had 2 wide receivers that he was throwing to that you might have heard of. Guys named Chad Johnson and TJ Hushmanzada. They each caught a few touchdowns. The Beavers led just 12-3 at halftime, and then Oregon State scored 29 points in just 8 minutes. Oregon State routed Notre Dame 41-9. Different bowl, different season, same thing. Notre Dame, maybe they should change their name to Notre Same, because it seems like this happens every year. The 2001 Fiesta Bowl comes in at number 2 on our list today. But we finish off our list of bowl games that Notre Dame was invited to that they really didn't deserve to go to, and we reach our number one entry. And I know when we're talking about these, I know they all seem like recent things. It's just the TV ratings. It's the social media era, right? But for our number one entry, we go clear back to the year 1972. See, Notre Dame started the season ranked number 13 in the country. They had a coaching legend at the time named Eric Parsegian coaching them. Their quarterback was named Tom Clements, and they had running backs Eric Pennick and Andy Huff. Notre Dame won 4 games in a row before they dropped a tough one to unranked Missouri. Okay, so that's a little bit tough. But then they strung together 4 more wins before they played USC. And USC blew them out 45-23. But again, it's Notre Dame. So instead of getting sent to the Holiday Bowl or the Independence Bowl or the Bluebonnet Bowl, they get sent to the Orange Bowl to face number 9 Nebraska and Heisman-winning running back Johnny Rodgers. Yeah, Nebraska jumped on the Irish hard. They led 40-0 before Notre Dame finally scored a touchdown in the fourth quarter. The game ended Nebraska 40, Notre Dame 6. Hey, I suppose we can look at this latest example of Notre Dame getting a bowl game that they probably shouldn't get, and we can complain that it should never happen again. I mean, think about this. It has been 27 years since Notre Dame won a meaningful bowl game. It was back on January 1st, 1994, when the Irish beat Texas A&M in a battle of 2 top 10 teams. But think about this. The Irish are 0-8 since then in New Year's 6 bowl games. They've lost the Cotton Bowl, the Rose Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, the Peach Bowl, the Orange Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, and most of those games are blowouts. Of course, after the game last week, Irish head coach Brian Kelly, he got all offended when he was asked about that record. Here's what he had to say. You guys watched the game, didn't you? Alabama made some plays on the perimeter. They made some dynamic plays. They have the college football player of the year in Devontae Smith. He made some dynamic plays, but we battled. We were right there. Not really sure what he was talking about. Alabama averaged 8 yards per play, and the game was never in doubt. But here's the thing. This is how it is. This is how it was. And this is how it will continue to be. Like it or not, college football is about money. And like we talked about earlier, Notre Dame brings in money. So we probably need to stop getting mad at Notre Dame getting these games and getting these rankings that they don't really deserve, because it's not going to end anytime soon. Then again, the blowouts that they get when they do get those games, they're probably not going to end anytime soon either. Notre Dame's football, a tradition unlike any other. Okay, YouTube, make sure that you go over and you check out the rest of the podcast. And I know I say that every week, but I'm telling you, you really need to go check out the full podcast this week. I actually have a guest stop by from a group here in Colorado called Let Colorado Play. They are pushing on our high school associations and on our politicians to get high school sports going again. She has actually been in contact with the governor of Colorado, and she has some info for whether or not our high school kids are going to get to play this year. Some interesting stuff going on in the world of sports here in Colorado and nationally. So I would encourage you to go check that out. Plus, we do also preview the College Football National Championship. We preview the NFL playoffs. And I also have to discuss the New Year's Eve celebrations that we saw last week. So make sure you go and you check out the rest of the podcast. I will leave a link for it here on YouTube in the comments for you. Hope you all are doing well. Hope you all are having a good start to the new year. I will see you all next Wednesday. Have a great week.